Muy bien, siendo las 2:30 de la tarde, les quiero pedir algo. Por favor, pónganse de pie, pero ahora no para que se abracen, ni se besen, nada de eso, sino les quiero dar un par de minutos, por favor, para que converses con tu compañero de al lado. Busca a alguien. Si estás solo, busca a alguien, por favor. Hagan parejas y en un minuto hagan como un resumen. ¿Qué les ha parecido este evento? ¿Cómo se sienten? ¿Qué lección podemos llevar hasta este momento? ¿Qué hemos aprendido en estos ya casi 2 días? ¿Correcto? Porque vamos a ver enseguida, fíjense el título, que nos puede servir mucho para el tema de la reunión de 5 minutos. ¿Correcto? ¿Qué hacemos antes de iniciar una jornada? Así que, por favor, tienen 1 minuto para poder conversar y intercambiar qué les ha parecido, cómo se sienten, cuál es esa lección aprendida que pueden llevar. Ya estamos ya a punto de completar el siguiente día. A ver, listos. ¿Quiere probarlo? ¿Está bien? Sí, gracias. Muy bien, muchas gracias, muy amables. Bueno, el tema que vamos a tratar enseguida es reunión informativa previo al trabajo y aprendizaje posterior a ello. Para el tema nos visita el día de hoy desde Estados Unidos Mark Xxiii. Tiene más de 35 años de experiencia en la carrera de seguridad pública. Mark ha trabajado como paramédico aéreo, oficial federal y de aplicación de la ley estatal. Es bombero y policía de servicio del Parque Nacional. Es guía de desierto, educador y piloto. El tope de su carrera fue liderar la búsqueda de emergencia y operaciones de rescate en el Parque Nacional del Gran Cañón. Interesante. En los últimos 25 años, Mark ha aplicado los principios de alta confiabilidad y nueva vista de seguridad en ambientes de alta intensidad. Ahora retirado de ser jefe de guardabosques, Mark sirve como expositor, instructor y consultor en organizaciones de desarrollo humano, seguridad en diferentes operaciones de aprendizaje y medicina de emergencia en el desierto. Por favor, recibamos a Mark con un fuerte aplauso para que nos presente el tema.
Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. And that is the extent of my Spanish. My wife speaks 4 languages, 4. I learn by listening. I learn by hearing things over and over again. In 4 languages, I can say with great confidence, pardon my husband, he's an imbecile. It's very nice to be with you. I'm going to talk to you today about hazardous work. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my background and how I came to be in front of you today. So I recently retired from a 35-year career in emergency services. And during that, I started when I was 4 years old. Let's just agree. See? Okay. I was a paramedic, working as a flight paramedic in helicopters. I was a firefighter. I was a police officer. And I spent most of my career as a national park ranger at Grand Canyon National Park in Estados Unidos. Who's been to Grand Canyon? Anyone? So please go. It's beautiful. Very interesting place, and a very interesting place for high hazard work, because what the Grand Canyon is an upside down mountain. And so people come, 5 million each year, and they stand there and they say, let's go down. And it's easy. And they get to the bottom. And when they're at the bottom, they say, yay, we made it. And then they say, where is the car? And then they have to get out. So in a busy year, we would have to fly and rescue people about 500 times in a year. Slower year, maybe 300. We would have between a dozen to 20 fatalities, injuries to visitors. And we would try to have 0 employee injuries and fatalities for the people that were doing the rescue work. But there were lots of hazards. Sometimes we would have to ride on the outside of the helicopter. When I got the job, I said, I don't really like to ride in the helicopter. They said, no problem, you can ride outside the helicopter. So we would do things like this. This is a person, that's me, with a patient flying out of the canyon. We would try only to do this when we had to save a life and we could not land close to the patient. The most common question rangers get at Grand Canyon is, how many times do people fall in? And the answer is once. The Rio Colorado, mighty river, runs through the middle. Sometimes it catches on fire. And sometimes bad people come. So we'd have to do law enforcement as well. By the way, I did not take this picture. I'm here to talk to you about being safe. This is a very stupid place to stand if you're taking a picture. This is actually a training scenario. So I spent the early part of my year doing rescues, doing the work, and then later on I was promoted to the point where I was responsible for keeping the rescuers, the people who were going out there and doing this work, for keeping them safe and making sure that they got home okay. And the one thing that I will tell you that you probably already know, but you're going to hear about from the other speakers here today, is one of the most important things we can do to keep our workers safe is to understand how the work is actually done. When Ron was talking to you earlier, he showed you that we have an idea of the way that we think the work we are going to do is planned. And it's often very good, but it's never perfect, because no 2 days are the same, and hazards and dangers are never the same. They're changing all of the time. And the best way to get better and stay safer is to learn from the workers, from the people who are doing the work, how our plan is working. Where are you having difficulties keeping safe? Where are you feeling friction and difficulties that you need assistance with? And what kinds of things can go wrong and harm you? And how can we protect you from those things? Not if they happen, but when they happen. Because if we do anything long enough, it's going to go wrong sometime. That's just nature. So I go from doing rescues to supervising rescues, and I spend a lot of my time asking, where are the rangers? Where are the workers? What are they doing today? So in this picture, this is your chief ranger test. Are you ready? Find the ranger in this picture. This cliff is 1,000 meters tall. There is an injured rock climber on there being rescued and lifted out on ropes by a 6-foot-tall ranger, and the climber is laying in a stretcher 6 feet long. Can you see him? I'll put a red arrow. This took lots of paint. Can you see the small dot? Let me zoom in a little better. There's the ranger, and there's the litter. Now I know that when my rangers go out and do this, that they're going to come back from that operation with tremendous information, valuable information. And they can tell me, did our equipment function as we wanted it to? Are our procedures strong and robust enough? Did you feel safe when you did this? And so you can imagine I was very, very happy with my rangers after they saved this person's life and got them out. And I wanted to buy them pizza and cerveza, I can say that, and ask them the questions, how did this go? Unfortunately, the National Park Service, who I worked for at the time, was very much into paying attention to low-level safety problems. Remember earlier today when Ron talked about Heinrich's idea, that if somehow we take care of ankle sprains and bee stings and poison ivy, and we pay attention to those things very carefully, and we count them and observe them, that somehow that will prevent us from having a super accident or a fatality. If I put you over this cliff and I was going to hang you on a rope and I said, I have 2 ropes, would you like to use 1 or 2? What would you say? Let's go ahead with 2. So we have 3,000, right? 2,000 meters of rope on this. And some of the rope got into poison ivy. Makes you itch. This is where tragedy happened, because one of the rangers got a rash, had to go to the doctor. That became a lost time injury because he had to go to the doctor. He's fine, but because he had to get a prescription, we had to do a big investigation. How are you going to prevent rangers from getting poison ivy? And the answer is, when you have kilometers of rope out, somebody's going to get poison ivy. But rangers don't want to tell me about the things that are really going on out there, because they see their boss having to go to meetings and fill out paperwork about poison ivy. So why would they tell me? And you also know we're having a problem with the way that we hook up the rope or the way we put the patient into the litter. I want to know those things, but they won't tell me because they see the pain that we suffer over poison ivy. So I want to talk about the important things, the things that actually keep people safe. The dilemma that we have is that the workers, the people out there doing the work, are the ones most likely to get injured. Can we agree on that? The people who are touching the machinery, who are touching the work, who are working in the dangerous environment are the most likely to not come home safe, because the work can be dangerous. But they are not 100% in charge of how their work goes. There are many people like us involved in that. Who else is involved? The bosses, the managers, the company leaders, of course, the customers, the regulators, the government agents. The person who's most likely to get hurt is at the far end of the stick, but the people who have a lot of influence over how that work is performed are way, way back up the chain. We need to recognize, as we go further and further from the work, that we still influence the safety of the people that are doing the work. In all of my times as a paramedic on an ambulance, I never one time came to an office building where people were standing in the parking lot, and I said, "Oh, what happened?" And they said, "Oh, Bob, the regulator, got his head caught in the word processor again." Doesn't happen. So what have we done? Think about your work, the things that you've done. Think about your industries 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Raise your hand if you think you're better, more productive, and safer than you were 50 or 100 years ago. Manos. Okay. I would agree. You're probably much better and safer. If we look over the past 7,500 years or so, we see that across many industries, many disciplines all over the world, we've done a very, very good job of decreasing accidents. But we are at a place where the things that really, really helped us to get better are not bringing us completely to zero. And of course, we want to be at zero, as hard as that is. So when we keep on trying the same things over and over again, but we're not getting more juice from them, it's time to do things a little bit differently. So first, we really, really needed lots of rules and regulations and compliance. We needed it because we had none. In the United States, we had children working barefoot on spinning equipment. No more. That's illegal. We needed those rules and regulations. Later, we started to look at the equipment and the systems that the people were working in, and we adjusted those to make it more easy for the people to do the right thing easily and harder to do the dangerous thing. And where we are now is looking at how the human beings are functioning in the systems and doing the jobs that they do with the tools that they have, and understanding that it's not just the system, It's not just the work, but it's also the people in the system. Those two things together are extremely important to understand. And the most important way to understand that is, again, to know from the workers what they're facing out there. You will hear about human and organizational performance very simply, and I'm going to concentrate on one of these things. Our premise is that error is normal. Your best person makes mistakes. Your oldest person makes mistakes, most experienced. Your youngest person makes mistakes, perhaps even more, but we all make mistakes. But the good news is most of the mistakes that we make as human beings don't have any consequence, because one thing we are very, very good at is identifying and then correcting before anything bad happens. But when something bad does happen, we will always find somebody who made an error, because we're constantly making errors. Blaming people for something that they did not mean to do in the first place doesn't fix anything. If I told you in 1 minute there's going to be an accident in this room, you would jump up and do anything you could to stop it. But the problem is you don't see them coming. And so if we don't see the accident coming, where does that leave us? It's kind of unsettling, because we would like to think we can prevent every accident. And if we just hold the people accountable and tell them to care more and do better, that the accidents won't happen. But we also know that's not true. People are influenced by the systems that they work in, the tools that they use, the people they're surrounded with, the production pressure. All number of things combine to influence how we act. Learning and improving is vital. Think about anything important that you do in your life. Buying a house, raising a family, taking care of your family. All of these things require decisions. And you know that you've made the best decisions when you had the best information. Why, when something happens to our workers, do we sometimes stop once we found the person who did the wrong thing and stop there without trying to understand how is what they were just about to do, how did that seem like just the right thing to do to them as they were struggling to get the job done and get home safely? Management's response matters. How we talk to people and interface with people after something goes wrong defines whether or not they are going to tell us how work is actually performed out there, and they're going to give us the corrective actions and the tools that we need to make things more productive and safer. And as an organization, you have bought and paid for this information. It lives in the heads of your workers and your managers and your supervisors, and if you are not getting it because people do not want to tell you the truth for fear of seeing the bosses have to go through meetings and paperwork that they don't want to, or they don't want themselves to be embarrassed or be labeled as a bad worker, then you are not going to hear that good information that you really need to keep things safe. So if we see where we've gone in the back that we made a lot of progress on was that our systems are great, it's the workers that are the problem. What we're thinking about more now is that workers are not the problem makers necessarily, they are the problem solvers. They are the people who complete our plan, who get it done and get it done safely and do it that way every day. Asking our workers what they need helps us to give them what they need. And this very important idea that safety is not the absence of accidents, it's the presence of capacity. Let me tell you what I mean by capacity. I wish that I could stop every accident before it happened, and I know that everybody in this room, if you knew an accident was coming, you would stop it, but they're accidents. That's why we have the word. It means that they're very, very hard to predict. So if you're dealing with something that's very hard to predict, maybe one of the best things you can do is assume that bad things are going to happen, and then ask yourself, when, not if those things happen, what is going to allow us to fail gracefully, to fail safely, to live for another day, to do better the next day when you come back in. We're going from preventing things from going wrong, which is very, very hard to do and has never been done 100% successfully, to making sure that things go right. And that's what I'm going to spend the balance of my time talking about. Let me show you some professionals. This is from the United States, in a state called Utah, which many people were surprised to learn is in the United States, but it is. I did not work there, but it's a small community of people who work and do rescues in helicopters. And they practice all of the time because they know that if anything goes wrong, bad things can happen. And nobody's going to get hurt here in this, what I show you, but I want to tell you about these workers because what they are doing today is that they were searching all night for an overdue hiker, a climber, who went missing. And they found her, but unfortunately, she had fallen and was killed. And so what they are doing here is they have her body, and they are going to place the body into the helicopter so that the helicopter can take the body down the mountain and get her body back to the family. That's what they're doing. And they practice all of the time. And they recognize something very important. They recognize the difference between a hazard and a risk. We tend to think of those things as being very similar. But I think for our discussion, we want to have a different thought about this. I want to tell you that when I think of a hazard, I think of something that I can see or maybe even objectively measure. A fire, hazard. Slippery oil on the ground, hazard. Explosive gas in a flame, hazard. Or here, a cliff. One step off the cliff, 800 feet down, finito. Risk is how close you work to the hazard. And I would tell us that the definition of expert and the experts that are in this room and the experts and the people that you work with is that what they are good at is working very, very close to the hazard and doing it every day and doing it very safely. That's what experts do. And these experts are about to do that, but they still take precautions because they ask themselves, even though we're very, very good at this, when it goes wrong, what's there to keep us safe? So when they look at the things that can go wrong, they say, well, we're working very close to the hazard of the cliff. We should be tied in with a rope. Not only that, if something happens to that rope, let's have a second rope. And so they have 2 ropes that they're tied in for. They practice all the time. They make sure the helicopter's working. The helicopter came in and sat there to make sure that it would work just fine, and then they went to do the work. Very good, very smart people who care. Watch the orange rope. So my question to you, success or failure? Failure, because you broke a helicopter, and helicopters are expensive. Success, because nobody gets hurt. I could see that accident right now, and I can tell you how to fix that accident. But I know that those good people who were trying very hard and were very successful at the work that they did every day did not temporarily and suddenly go from being very good, dedicated people to the worst, most stupid people. They were working in a system where they really thought that they had all of the controls in place to do that job safely. They also recognized that maybe we're missing something, and if that's the case, maybe we should double up in our protection, and they did, and that's what allowed them to come home safely. Safety is not the absence of accidents. They're very hard to predict. It's the presence of capacity. Who here has rented a car before? You go to the airport and you rent a car. I rent lots of cars. I try to rent the cheapest, least expensive car that they have. The Kia Blind Spot is my favorite car. Sometimes when you go to get the car, they tell you for an extra $15, you can have a nicer car. If they tell that to you, your answer should be, no, thank you. Do you know why? Because they've already sold out of the terrible car that you reserved, and they're hoping to get a little more money for the nice car that they have left. And when you say no, they will say, well, I'm sorry, sir, but all we have is this really nice car for you today, and that happened to me. And they handed me keys. It wasn't even a key, just a fob. And I looked at it. It said Volvo. I'm thinking, who does not look sexy in a Volvo? Okay, maybe not, but still. So I go out to the car. I find it. I push the button. It honks at me. Never driven a car like this before. I get in. I close the door. This is a solid car. I am sealed inside. I look for the place to put the key. No keyhole. Oh, there's a button. I push the button. Engine starts. And then other things start to happen. Because this particular car, if you owned it, has a very nice feature. It remembers where the seat goes based on who is carrying the key. So I can't tell you anything about the person who had the car before me, except they were 1 meter tall. And so the seat starts to go toward the windshield. The steering wheel starts to come up to my face. The pedals are moving around, and it's not stopping. I'm going to get crushed into the car. I can't get out. Nobody can hear me because it's such a good car. I finally push all the buttons that I can, and it stops. I get to my hotel room, and I decide I need to learn how to use this car to do it safely. I type in the car, Volvo XC90, and I see the news, the headline, Volvo says in that car, by the year 2020, you will not die in a traffic accident in that car. That car is so safe and so well engineered, you will not die in that car. What do you think about that? Crazy? Kind of crazy. So I look a little deeper. I look at statistics worldwide where they keep records on that car. Nobody has died in that car since 2008. So the question becomes, do they already have a car that is fatality-free? Now I see you're an overachiever. He's thinking, I could kill myself in that car. You give me gasoline, a lighter, a cliff, ocean, I'll get it done. I'll kill myself in that car. But isn't that a remarkable thing? Picture a car from 1955, maybe a 1955 Chevrolet, no airbags, probably no seatbelt. If you got into a wreck in that car, you'd feel safe because it's big and heavy as a tank. Compare that to the car that you drove here today in, probably. It has a plastic bumper. It doesn't feel very substantial. If you were going to go out this afternoon and have a head-on crash, would you rather be in a new car or that old car? You'd much rather be in the new car. It's much more survivable. Maybe not 100%, because here's what the auto industry did for all of us. It's 50 years ago, they said, our model for making sure that our roads are safe is to ask every driver, all of us, to be perfectly attentive, don't speed, don't be drunk, and be courteous. And if you do those 4 things, you will not have an accident. And then we all went out and drove, and what did we do? We had accidents. And we killed a lot of people in accidents. But it's so much better now than it was then, because the auto industry got the idea of capacity. Instead of assuming that the only way to keep us safe on the road was to make sure that everybody was perfect all of the time, they decided, why don't we think that they are going to buy our new car and they are going to drive it out and they're going to get into a wreck. And let's make that wreck more survivable. So that car that you drive here today in, does it have airbags? Yes, probably has over 2,000 design engineered safety features so that when you wreck, God forbid, you're going to be okay. The chances are you're going to survive. We need to think about doing that in our workplaces as well. This idea of capacity. When things go wrong, how are we going to solve it? But we've spent so much of our energy and time on prevention. Ask people to be perfect. Ask them to care. Put in lots and lots of rules and regulations. Maybe put a sign. We've gone 10,000 days with nobody getting hurt here. Then you twist your ankle on a Friday. Do you go tell your boss, I twisted my ankle on that dangerous piece of equipment, and your clock is going to reset to 0 days? Or do you go home for the weekend and hope that it gets better? You go home for the weekend and hope that it gets better, because you've been disincentivized to talk about what you're up against. As opposed to the idea of recovery. We want prevention. We want to give people good rules to follow. We want to give them personal protective equipment, but we also want to have a place for them to fail safely when things do go wrong. Every accident, every story that you ever have in your workplaces is going to have 3 parts. We tend to spend too much of our time in retrospective understanding. I am an accident expert. I can tell you how every accident that has already happened could have been prevent it, and so can you. You're an accident expert as well in the last accident. We need to be thinking about the next accident and make it safer and better. If you spend your limited time understanding the context over here on the left, then what you have is the story of people as the accident or incident was happening. And you're going to learn what they were struggling with. You're going to learn where they were having difficulties, which parts of your plan were not working, or what surprised not only them, but also you as the organization. And then you're going to know what to fix. It doesn't feel as good or as easy as blaming and punishing or retraining people, but you get so much more value out of it. The thing about human beings is right before something goes wrong, unless you were intentionally trying to break something or harm something, it probably felt like you were doing just the right thing. Switching our mindset from to what failed rather than who failed. You're always going to ask, who touched it last? Who went left when they should have gone right? Who pushed this button and not that button? We're always going to have that information. But the more important question is that how did that happen? What failed in our system as the person was interfacing it to allow this to happen? Like Ron showed in the World War II bombers. The button for landing with the flaps down was exactly the same as the button for pulling the wheels up, until they changed the shape of it. I'm a pilot. I know I have 3 knobs: wheels up, wheels down, throttle, mixture, gasoline, and I can tell without even looking if my hand is on the right one. But our older model was just make sure that they really do it right every single time, and people just don't. We talked about this a little bit, and I'm sure you're going to see it more today, but I won't spend a whole bunch of time on it. The black line. The black line is every rule, regulation, procedure, best practice, educational requirement, or standard in our industries. And it's very good and very important stuff. We need the black line. The black line comes in the form of notebooks and manuals and computer programs, things that we can reference that tell us how to go out and do our jobs to the expectation of the organization, of the regulators. We need that. The problem is that it's very, very difficult to write a perfect plan that works comprehensively every single day. If I asked you to write a perfect plan for how you drove your car here today, you would run out of paper, you would run out of lifetime before you could precisely describe every single step. Try something simple. Write a very in-depth procedure about how to brush your teeth. How many pounds of pressure do you put on the tube to get just the right amount of toothpaste on the toothbrush? You would go broke and crazy trying to do that. So our plans, as good as they are idealized, and they're written for clarity and understanding, and we need them. But we know from this discussion earlier today that the blue line is the way work actually happens. If I come to your work site on the best, safest, and most productive day that you've ever had in history, and I pulled open every book and every manual and every rule and regulation, do you think I could find somebody at least in technical violation of some of that stuff? Absolutely. Because people are constantly making mistakes or misinterpretations. Sometimes it is absolutely impossible to be 100% compliant. And we are very, very seldom only doing one thing at a time. We're operating a piece of equipment, we're watching out for other people, we're thinking about 3 different things that need to happen next to get the work done. We are very seldom just running one simple procedure. We live in a very complex world where many procedures and many things are happening around us all of the time. The only time that we look at this is when something bad happens. And the natural thing for us to do is to ask, how far was the worker off of the black line? How far away were they from the expectations of what we wanted them to do? And when we do that, we're always going to find the name of a person or people, and we're always going to find some errors that they should not have made, or miscalculations, or maybe even intentional deviations that they should not have done that we didn't expect them to do. But I think it's really important for us to think about what's happening in our normal work, because most days we go to work and we don't kill anybody. Most days we produce what we're expected to produce and sometimes do even better. Most days everything works just fine. But even on those days, you will still find people making mistakes. It's just that as human beings, they're constantly recognizing them and fixing them. We need to be very interested in what's happening up here. Let me ask you a question. What is the difference between a shortcut, like, ooh, They took a shortcut
tomaron un atajo
versus an improvement.
una mejora.
And I will tell you that the difference is whether it worked or not. If it worked, we're going to take that information and put it into the black line and tell people there's a much better way to do this. Jose invented a better, safer way. We're going to do that from now on. If it didn't work, Jose took a shortcut, deviated off of our plan. Our plans don't tell us on February 22nd, 2019, that we are going to change the way we do things and make it safer and better. The only place we learn that is from the actual work going on. And the actual work going on is always something different than our black line plan. I want to talk about the precious time that workers have before they actually go and do work. The time when they actually have an interval, a moment to plan what they're going to do before they do it. We know this is important, but we know it can be kind of hard to do because workers have basically two kinds of time. They have times to think about and plan the work, and they actually have a separate time to go do the work. You can't do the two very well at the same time. It's hard to learn and perform at the same time. So if we give workers some space when they're dealing with a hazardous or complex job to understand that where that black line ends is our best laid plan, but what we want from them is to think about how does this plan match up with the work that we are about to do? And should we even engage this work unless we can make it safe? What do we need to look out for? Every time we would climb in the helicopter, no matter how urgent the situation, we would pull out a little card and talk to each other in our pre-job and ask, here's what, I'm the person in charge, here's what I think we need to do. Here's what I'm concerned about that might be dangerous or cause us problems. Here's what I think we should do to make those things safer or mitigate them. And importantly, now what do you think? We train the people on the crew from the most junior to the most senior that they have to speak up. They have to tell us that having 5 brains at work on something complicated is much, much safer and better than just having a single brain that nobody questions. So having people have those conversations. And then we actually go do the work. And when we go do work, one of 3 things happens. Mostly what happens is we're successful. We're happy. It worked like it was supposed to. We got the job done, and we get to go home in one piece and be proud about ourselves and our family. Or we find a better way to do something. Like, hey, you know, if we do this way slightly differently, or if we change the sequence up, we can be more productive and still remain safe. That's an innovation. We'll never hear about that unless we're asking people, unless we're present and curious about how work is done successfully. But we're always there when something bad happens. When there's an incident, we are always there with our black line comparing where was the worker compared to where we wanted them to be, and then being left with the dilemma of just, he's a good guy, but I guess we have to blame, shame, and retrain them because that would be fair, because that's what we did to the last person who messed this up. The idea of looking and being curious as leaders, curious as managers about when we're successful, what makes us successful, and being present when things are going well so that workers and people are much more likely and comfortable to tell you about things when they're going wrong. If you only show up after something bad has happened, people don't want to talk to you. The great thing about this is what we get is what we have already bought and paid for. We get operational intelligence. We get to know more about our systems. We get to know more about our plans because the people are willing to tell us and talk about it. But like I said, if you only show up when things go wrong, you will not have the credibility to have their trust and understanding when things go right. If you want great procedures, if you want a really good black line, if you want to fine-tune it and make it better, then have the people who use them write them. Has everybody here heard of, and I'm sure you have, stop work authority? That we tell workers, when you go and do the work, if you see that it's becoming dangerous, you have our permission to stop. Would everybody agree that's good? I think as I'm moving forward towards work, I want to have permission to be able to stop. That's good. The problem is when it doesn't work, we know in the aftermath of the accident when they should have stopped, and then we punish them for not stopping. Knowing in our hearts that if somebody knows the next thing they do is going to cause harm or disaster, they certainly would have stopped, unless they're a murderer or an arsonist, and we don't tend to hire many murderers and arsonists. So always have stop work authority, but have conversations with your people about start work authority. And this gets back to that idea of capacity. We're doing this successful work. We've had a couple of near misses that we want to learn from, or everything's been going perfectly. There's no need to pay attention to this. But then asking our workers, instead of thinking about being that perfect driver and getting it right every single time, what happens on the day when you don't get it right? What happens when the equipment doesn't function as expected? What happens when you are not at your best and you're tired, or you're getting over a cold, or you're not feeling well and things go wrong? When that happens, when that process goes wrong, when those brakes fail, what keeps you safe? And they will tell you the story of, well, if that happens, then this kicks in and keeps me safe. Or that's why I have PPE. Or that's why I wear my seatbelt. And they will tell you stories about capacity, but then go deeper and say, let's identify in the work that we're going to do, what are the serious things that can hurt us and kill us, or cause harm to the company and to the people that we care about? What are those things? And then ask the question, when, not if, but when that fails, what can make it better? What can make it safer? Obviously, the easy answer is like, well, don't do the thing. But we get hired to do the thing. I've never been to a 100% safe work environment, but I can imagine what it's like. A 100% safe work environment, how much gets done? Zero. Can you drive 100% safely? That means you never drive. But having capacity in the system that when things go wrong, we have a safe place to fail. So this idea of not only having stop work authority and telling people when things go wrong or start to go wrong, you can stop, have the conversation about what needs to be in place before we start this job. They were killing lots of workers in California and the United States, cutting down trees over and over and over again. Ron and some of my other colleagues worked with the company that was doing this, and they worked with the workers to say, what are the controls that we need in place before we start this work, and give them permission to not even start if they couldn't meet those criteria. And now they've killed zero. Knock on wood. Let's hope it stays safe. But it's certainly an improvement. We have to stop seeing workers as problems to be fixed solely. That's why you have a human resources department. If you accidentally hire a bad person who is intentionally coming there to cause harm to people in your systems, then you have a human resources problem, not a safety problem. Get rid of those people. But I think that I'm in a room full of people who work very hard to not cause harm and to try to bring people into their work that also don't cause harm. You can either blame and punish, or you can learn and improve, but you can't do both. You have a choice to make, one or the other. Knowing less about anything of consequence does not make you smarter or safer. Having more information and having people willing to tell you that information is what makes your life better. I want you to do your homework here. Change your thinking from if to when, and then ask workers, when this fails, not if this fails, because we are all optimists, when this fails, what's here to keep us safe? And then, is that enough? Safety is not the absence of accidents, it's the presence of capacity. Remember that picture that I showed you there before, where I had to ride on the outside of the helicopter with the hurt kid? We had a perfect plan. This is that same helicopter 3 days later, in pieces on the ground. Nobody hurt. Everybody walks away. A miracle. Because we ask, when this helicopter crashes, because if we fly it enough, it is going to crash. First, how do we prevent it? And we put a lot of work into preventing it, making sure that the maintenance was perfect, making sure that the pilots were very well trained and very good, making sure that the whole crew worked together. But then we still ask ourselves, even if we do all of those things, if we keep on flying, eventually something like this is going to happen. Usually when you see a picture like this, it will have the headline, pilot error, pilot made a mistake. It's rare to see simple, just mechanical failure, but that's what this was. The control system that kept the helicopter from spinning out of control broke. A cable that wasn't supposed to break broke. The capacity in the system, because we'd had those conversations, is what allowed everybody to walk home safely. What allowed everybody to get out of this in one piece. Because the pilot, as a practice of capacity, coming in for a landing always carries extra altitude. Because it's just like in our work. When things are going wrong in our world, we need two things. Pilots need these two things to solve a problem. We need altitude and an idea. Because altitude gives you the time to recover and see that things are going wrong. So the pilot detects that things are going wrong, and because they have the practice and the capacity to carry extra altitude close to the ground, he realizes, I'm going to crash this helicopter. It's going to happen, but I'm going to crash it in a way that's going to be as least harmful as possible. And they had practiced on this and thought it like the driving simulator that you have out here. They had practiced it. And so he puts that helicopter down, absorbs a lot of energy as it begins to bend and break, and then intentionally rolls it onto its side so the spinning pieces go flying away and the hot engine doesn't crash down on the 5 people inside. Everybody walks away. The remarkable thing is that in our government, the Federal Aviation Administration, the National Transportation Safety Board, does not officially classify this as a crash. They call this a hard landing. I don't know how it is in Peru, but I have insurance on my car. And I think if I called my agent and said, it's not broken, it's a hard landing, it's in 3 pieces, but it's okay, that they would call it a crash. But somehow in helicopters, we get the extra. I thank you so much for your time. It's just wonderful to visit your beautiful country. I'm working very, very hard on my Spanish because it's a beautiful language and I don't want to insult you, but at least we got through this and I can say.
Muy bien.
Gracias.
Le damos un fuerte aplauso, por favor.
Thank you. God bless.
Okay, thank you. Muy bien. A ver, manos felices levantadas para preguntas.
Raise your hands for questions. Do we have questions?
¿No?
No
¿Preguntas?
questions? No questions?
No.
No?
Bien, entonces despedimos a Mark y esto con un fuerte aplauso, por favor. Thank you. Aprovecho para hacer una comunicación. El Xxiii, con la proyección hacia el futuro, está a punto de cerrar un convenio para tener un simulador virtual. Entonces los invitamos, por favor. El stand está saliendo por esta puerta, casi al final han visto ahí un vehículo. Traten de ir, probarlo, porque queremos recibir un poco la opinión de ustedes, los usuarios, porque va a ser un simulador que nos va a servir para dar capacitación para manejo defensivo en tiempo real. Bien, entonces, por favor, en el break, mañana, traten de venir un poco más temprano, traten de usar el vehículo, probarlo, y luego, por favor, sus opiniones van a ser muy valiosas. Bien, entonces, para tener un poco más de tiempo, vamos a presentar el siguiente tema. El tema es el siguiente: desempeño humano y organizacional, Job como un nuevo enfoque de seguridad, reflexiones y experiencias. Interesante el tema, esto lo va a disertar la doctora Judy Lin. Ella es vicepresidenta de Soluciones de Seguridad en Audelais International, con más de 27 años de experiencia. Tiene un PhD en análisis de comportamiento aplicado. Julie actúa con diferentes negocios para crear un comportamiento basado en intervenciones que usan los métodos positivo y práctico para la mejora del desempeño humano. Judy ha trabajado en diferentes industrias, incluyendo los ferrocarriles, aceite y gas, industria química, minería, utilidades, productos alimenticios, asegurar la sanidad de alimentos y mejorar el compromiso del trabajador. Julie es una escritora y conferencista reconocida en el campo del comportamiento de seguridad y liderazgo. Es autora de artículos de varias publicaciones ha participado en grandes conferencias de seguridad. Julie ha escrito 3 libros: Removing Obstacles to Safety, Accident y Supervisor Guía de Safety. Finalmente ha asociado este libro a lo que es el liderazgo, leadership. Ella ha obtenido un PhD en psicología en la Universidad Victoria del Canadá, así que las chicas de psicología acá tienen otra profesional que nos va a dejar una gran enseñanza esta tarde. Recibámoslos a Judy, por favor, con un fuerte aplauso para que nos presente el tema.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. Now I'm wondering what he said about me that made you all laugh. I speak no Spanish at all, and my apologies for that, but I'm also very delighted to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I want to start with a little bit about who I am and the company that I work for, Aubrey Daniels International. We are a behavior-based consulting company, so we do behavior-based safety. More of our work is in the area of safety leadership. All of the work we do is based on the science of behavior. So our safety leadership work, our safety culture work is all focused on how can we create an environment that encourages everyone at every level of the organization to do the things they need to do to keep everybody safe. So our focus is on behavior. I've been with Aubrey Daniels International for 27 years. We've done a lot of work in mining. We don't work exclusively in mining, but many of our clients are in mining. And in fact, right now I'm working with 2 ICMM organizations, and actually, if there's anyone here from Antapaccay, I have a consultant, a colleague of mine, who will be here at Antapaccay next week, I believe it is, to do some safety leadership training. The work that we've done in mining most recently has been around critical controls that we heard some about this morning, and life-saving behaviors. And so our focus is in ensuring that those critical controls get in place, get done, that people are doing the things they need to do consistently. So today I'm going to talk to you about behavior-based safety and human and organizational performance. As you might imagine, I'm going to talk more about the behavior-based safety piece of it. I'm hoping I can dispel some myths about behavior-based safety and show you how these 2 different approaches to safety are actually extremely complementary. And so I'm going to end my talk with some tips on how to make use of both of them in order to improve safety. So I'm going to start with a definition of behavior-based safety. And for a lot of people, behavior-based safety has a very narrow definition. Many people think of it as we create a list of behaviors for the front line, and then we do observations, peer observations, and give people feedback trying to change those behaviors. And that certainly is a component of behavior-based safety systems, but that's just a very small piece. Unfortunately, when behavior-based safety became popular about 25 years ago, and organizations were looking for behavior-based safety systems, a lot of different people started saying, oh, I can do that, I can do behavior-based safety, and a lot of consulting companies popped up that created behavior-based safety systems. Organizations developed their own, and many of those were not as good as they should have been. Many of them were not based on the science of behavior. Now, you would think if you have something called behavior-based safety, it should be based on the science of behavior, but unfortunately, many of them were not. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is what behavior-based safety should look like, and in doing so, hopefully, help you understand the broader application of it. So what is it? It is basically a scientific approach to ensure consistent behavior at every level of the organization. So behavior-based safety should not just be about the frontline behavior. We need to make sure, for example, that our supervisors are having meaningful pre-shift meetings, that they're really talking about the work of the day and what the critical hazards are and what the critical controls are that need to be in place. So that's behavior. We need those people to do those things well, not just the front line. Behavior-based safety starts with setting setting really clear expectations about what we need at every level. It's usually pretty clear at the front line what we need people to do because we have all these processes and procedures and rules in place that we've been talking about today. But what about our managers? What about our supervisors? What about our executives? In my experience, we're not as clear with those levels of management. We're not as clear with them about what we need them to do. What are the most important things for them to do on a day-to-day basis to improve safety? And so a good behavior-based safety program will do that. How do we figure out what those critical behaviors are? We should look at data. What are the things that are injuring people? And not just the frequent injuries, but also what are the serious injuries? What are the potential fatalities that we might have? We need to look at all of those and identify critical behaviors at each level. We need to talk to people. And that's kind of been a theme of the day. Talk to the people at the front line, the people doing the work. They know best what's most important to do. It also, behavior-based safety obviously includes observation. If we can identify what we need people to do, we need some ways to check, are we doing them? But importantly, if people aren't doing them, why? So as some of the speakers talked about already today, we need to start with the assumption that people are doing what makes sense to them. They're doing the job the best way they know how. And if there's a deviation from a procedure, if they're not doing something the safe way, in many cases there's a good reason for that. And the reason usually has something to do with management practices, what we're focusing on, what we're not focusing on, organizational systems, and I'll talk some more about that. In addition to doing observations, we should be looking at what are the things that prevent people from doing the right things? What are the barriers? We should also be looking at hazards. So in a good behavior-based safety system, when people are observing peers for safe behaviors, they also see hazards more often, in my experience, than they had before. They're looking more, they're thinking about safety more, and they start noticing additional things, additional hazards, and we get those reported and get those taken care of. So a good behavior-based safety system should improve hazard remediation in addition to improving behavior at all levels of the organization. Again, I want to dispel a few myths about behavior-based safety, some things that I hear as I'm out speaking at conferences and going to conferences. And one of the things that I hear most often is that behavior-based safety is a blame the worker program. And I want to say right here, right now, if it's done properly, it is not a blame the worker program. In fact, it's the opposite. If you look at behavior from a scientific perspective, what that means is you are looking at the things that influence behavior, and I'm going to talk some about that in a little bit, and that automatically leads you to not blame the worker, but say, what are the things in the environment? What are the management practices? What are the organizational systems? What's happening with the physical conditions? All of those things. And those things become the focus of your improvement effort. Now, I know there have been some behavior-based safety systems that have turned into a blame the worker program. And if you have one of those in your organization, I encourage you to make some changes to it. You can come talk to me afterwards because it should not be that. We always want to look at behavior and analyze it from the performer's perspective. And again, I think we've heard that consistent message here today, that if you really want to understand how work is really done and why people sometimes deviate from what we expect them to do, you need to put yourself in the performer's shoes. You can do that through observing. You need to do that through talking to people. And we have a particular tool that we use that helps you do that. And inevitably, when people do that, when leaders do that, they end up saying, you know what? If I was doing that job, I probably would have done exactly what that person did. So again, done well, it's not about blaming the worker. Again, if we're doing this properly and we're having the kind of conversations we should have in behavior-based safety, it leads to cooperative problem solving. well, we can talk together about what's the best path forward, what can we do in the future. And it engages workers, it empowers workers. All right, and just another note about the notion of BBS being a blame the worker program. What I would suggest is the blame mentality has been there all along. It's embedded in our culture. I can't speak for your culture, but I will speak for North America. Anytime anything goes wrong, not just in safety, we look for who to blame. If there's a software glitch, who do we blame? If there's some problem at government level, who do we blame? And so it's just a part of our culture when something goes wrong to try to find somebody to point the finger at. So BBS isn't responsible for this. BBS can be part of the solution. We get away from blaming the worker because, as we've heard today, and I agree 100%, there's no value in this. There's no value in blame whatsoever. So I think one of the solutions to this is to broaden the definition of what behavior-based safety is. This is from Wikipedia, and I like this definition, and this really is the way we go about doing behavioral safety in my organization. Behavior-based safety is the systematic application of the science of behavior to real-world safety problems. There's nothing in there that says it's about the front line only. There's nothing in there that says it's about blame. It's about using the science, and there is so much to know about behavior, and there's a whole science that tells us a lot about it that many organizations don't tap into, and that's unfortunate. In fact, I would argue that a behavioral approach is essential to get really good at safety. If you want to be world-class at safety, you must understand behavior scientifically. Why do I say that? Because everything we do in safety involves behavior. Improving our systems involves behavior. Instituting critical controls involves behavior. Doing risk analysis involves behavior. We've got to figure out how we can get people to do all the things we need them to do as consistently as they possibly can. And again, there's a whole science that tells us a whole lot about that. So what I want to do is spend a little bit of time on the science of behavior. How many people are familiar with the ABC model? Show of hands. Any? Okay, I figured there would be several people. The ABC model is the foundation of the science of behavior. It's deceptively simple. It looks like, wow, nothing is as simple as ABC. It is a simple model, but there's a whole lot more underneath it. What this model tells us is there are two things that influence human behavior. The first is antecedents. The A is for antecedent. An antecedent is anything that comes before behavior that prompts behavior. So training is an antecedent. A procedure is an antecedent. An instruction is an antecedent. A meeting is an antecedent. So antecedents come before behavior and they prompt us to do the behavior. On the other end are consequences. Now, consequences are anything, good or bad, it's not just the bad stuff, good or bad, that influence behavior. So if I follow a procedure and it allows me to get the work done faster, I'm more likely to do that procedure again. If I follow a new procedure and it's hard to do and it's cumbersome and it slows me down and I get flack from my colleagues because I'm taking too long, I'm probably less likely to follow that procedure in the future. So pretty straightforward. Of the two, antecedents and consequences, which do you think has the biggest impact on our behavior? Consequences? That's correct. If you're thinking consequences, that's the correct answer. Antecedents set us up, but what helps us continue to do what we're doing is on the consequence end. Right? Now this is, most people, when they hear this and they're thinking about it, would agree with that. They say, yeah, that makes sense. You know, we can all go through great training and go back to work and do what we learned in training for a little while, and then before we know it, we find ourselves back in our old habits. How many of you have had that experience? Go through good training, you try it for a while, and then pretty soon you say, hey, what happened? We had that great training and we're not doing it anymore. The answer is consequences. And my guess is all of you have experienced this in safety all the time, where you've got great training. You put people through good training. Everyone understands it. They go back to work, and if you check in 3 months later, you find they're not following the training anymore. The reason for that is the consequences in the work environment don't support that new behavior. So we need to start paying more attention to consequences. So what do we know from the science? Antecedents are necessary but not sufficient. Can prove it again and again and again in the science that if all we do is tell people what to do, put up some signs, train them, that we're going to get some behavior change, but it's not going to last. Consequences are what change behavior and what keep people doing things and ongoing. The other thing we know from the science is the more immediate a consequence is, as opposed to sometime in the future, consequences that happen right now or shortly after a behavior are much more powerful than ones that happen in the future. And a consequence that is certain to occur or happens all the time or most of the time is much more powerful than one that sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. So an example of an immediate certain consequence, if you put your hand on a hot stove, you'll get burned right now every time you do it. And how many times do children put their hand on a hot stove before they learn not to do that anymore? One time. That's right, one time. Now, if all the injuries in your workplace were like that if people did the wrong thing, they would get hurt every time, for sure, right now, then we wouldn't all be here. The behaviors that you're struggling with, the injuries that we're still dealing with, are injuries where it's possible to do the wrong thing over and over and over again and nothing bad happens, right? We can speed in our car to work day after day, year after year, and nothing bad happens. People can go their whole careers working in a workplace without doing some of the things they should be doing and not get hurt. And that's unfortunate in the sense that it teaches us that it's okay to do it this way, that it's okay to take that shortcut. It's okay not to follow the procedures. So we learn by the consequences. Now, I want to say something here. Why would people take the shortcut? Why would people speed on their way to work or speed in a vehicle? It's because of the consequences. Is there a payoff for speeding? Yeah, we get to work on time, right? We avoid getting in trouble for being late. So there are other consequences taking place that strengthen the undesired behaviors. So if we want to better understand behavior, we need to look at not just the antecedents, but also the consequences. What happens to people when they're on the job, doing the work that encourages them to do one thing over another? The more we understand that, the more we can create a safer workplace. The other thing we know from the science is that positive consequences are most efficient and effective. And I'm going to come back and talk about that. Negative consequences actually undermine safety culture. They undermine safety culture. And we heard some of this morning, the whole notion of blaming, the whole notion of punishing people when they do something wrong. What we all know happens when we do that is people stop talking. They stop telling us stuff. So I'll talk some more about that. Now, all of this may sound like it's all about people interactions, but antecedents and consequences are environmental events. They can be from the work itself. The work itself can provide consequences. Peers can provide consequences. Management certainly can provide consequences. Organizational systems, customers, all of that, all of the things that are operating in the environment can be antecedents and consequences. So a behavioral approach is very much a systems approach. We look at individual behavior, whether that's the behavior of a frontline performer, the behavior of a supervisor, a manager, or an executive. If you analyze anybody's behavior, it's influenced by management practices, right? What do our managers encourage? What do our managers talk about? What do they praise us for? What do they reprimand us for? What do they pay most attention to? What do they ask us questions about? Also, organizational systems. Everything from how we measure performance to our incentive systems. So I know, for example, in the U.S., most miners, frontline miners, operate under incentive systems. They get paid incentive money for production. What does that do to safe behavior? You can guess. And all of that also is influenced by culture. So all of these things, management practices, organizational systems, and culture, provide a whole host of antecedents and consequences that influence behavior. So the ABC model makes it look very simple, like there's an antecedent, there's a behavior, there's a consequence. In reality, there's a lot of antecedents, and there's a lot of consequences. And every day, as people are working, those consequences are changing, and that's some of what we've been hearing about this morning. We can't assume it stays the same. It doesn't stay the same. In mining, it never stays the same, right? The physical workspace is constantly changing. Therefore, some of the antecedents and consequences are constantly changing. And so having those conversations that we heard about today, interacting with the people doing the work, becomes essential if we want to really understand what's driving performance at the front line. Now, who has the biggest influence on organizational systems and culture? Is it the frontline worker? It's leaders, right? Leadership are the ones that can change the systems, that can change the incentive systems, change the management systems. Leaders are the ones who set the culture, who can communicate where safety is in terms of whether it's a value or it's a priority or it's further down on the list. So a lot of the work that we do in our organization now is focused on leadership, on changing leader behaviors to better support behavior at the front line. There are two ways that leaders, whether they be frontline supervisors, managers, or senior leaders, but largely it's people that interface at the front line. There's two strategies that people can use when they go about managing safety performance. And we talk about them in terms of safety cop or safety coach. So in other words, safety police or safety coach. So let me talk about what the safety cop looks like. A safety cop, just like the police in our cultures, the police go out and they look for what's wrong, right? Their job is to look for violations, look for people doing things they shouldn't be doing, and that's when they intervene. Think about your supervisors and your managers, and think about what they do around safety. Do they go out, work through the work area, and largely look for things that are wrong? People doing things they shouldn't be doing? Hazardous conditions? Do they mostly talk to frontline workers when things are going wrong? I don't know what it's like, obviously, in your organization, but I've been doing this 27 years, and I've talked to an awful lot of frontline workers. And what most of them tell me is, the only time I hear from my supervisor is when I've done something wrong, when there's a problem, when I've made a mistake. If that's the only time people hear from you, then, by definition, you've become the safety cop. So what does it mean to be a safety cop? We focus on exceptions. We focus on at-risk behavior. We focus on what's wrong. And then, because we focused on what's wrong, we're in a position where we have to use negative consequences. We correct. We reprimand. We remind. In some cases, we discipline. The perception on the part of the frontline performer then is that you're the enforcer. You're the one who's going to get me in trouble if I do something wrong. This is not a helpful approach to managing safety because it leads to people not wanting to talk to you. And again, we heard this morning. If people aren't willing to be open and honest, tell you what's really going on, tell you why that procedure isn't going to work and never has worked, we can't be using the safety cop approach, because they will be afraid and they won't want to talk to us. Does that make sense to everybody? How many of you would say that too much of the management around safety in your organization falls into that category? It's a lot of safety cop, of talking to people when they're doing it wrong, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's pretty common. The alternative is what we call safety coach. So a safety coach is someone who is there to support, to help people do the right thing, to help people improve. In some of the language we talked about this morning, to look with the performer and say, why is this not working? What do we need to do to change it? How do we make it better? The tools that a safety coach would use are more about asking questions versus telling. Too many supervisors feel like they need to be the boss, they need to tell everybody what to do, they should do more asking. Tell me why you did it this way. I know you're a good performer, and I saw you do this. Describe to me why this seemed like the best idea to you. What's going on here? Talk to me. Tell me what's going on. The safety coach also looks for system changes. So when you talk to people and you ask them questions about why it's not working the way it's supposed to, that leads you to, okay, well, maybe we need to change that procedure. Maybe we need different equipment. Maybe we need system changes. And the last piece is about using more positive consequences than negative consequences. So again, when I go out and talk to organizations and I talk to frontline performers and they tell me the only time I hear about safety is when something's wrong, what I know is they're never hearing when they do it right. They never hear good job. They never get any recognition for the things they do well. You guys are in mining. If you didn't have people doing the right things most of the time, you'd have disaster every day. Your folks are doing the right thing 95% of the time. And if they never hear anything about the good work they're doing, if they never hear about the safe things they're doing, and we only talk to them when something goes wrong, you can see why that starts to build resentment and why people start to feel like you don't really care about safety. You're just trying to, follow the procedures and follow the rule book. We need to talk to people. We need to listen to people. We need to acknowledge the good things they do. As we heard from some of the speakers this morning, people are very creative when they're on the job, and they are always, almost always trying to do the right thing. And they're finding ways to get the job done. And they're not doing anything purposefully to get hurt or to hurt others. So if we ask more and recognize the creativity, recognize the things they're doing well, they're going to be a lot more likely to open up to us. All right, so if you look at those two strategies from a scientific perspective, the safety cop approach is technically using a lot of negative reinforcement and punishment, if you care to know that. If you look at research on what happens when people work under that safety cop approach, the negative reinforcement approach, what you find is people do what we call just enough to get by. They do what they have to stay out of trouble and no more. So when the boss is around, they'll do the right thing, they'll put it on their PPE. Maybe when the boss is not around, they won't do all those things. They only do the right thing to avoid getting in trouble. When people operate under the safety coach approach of managing, you get what we call discretionary effort. People are willing to do more than they have to. So what does that look like in safety? It looks like people who, in a pre-shift meeting, raise their hand, talk about things that are going on, make suggestions about how things could be better. These are people who are willing to intervene when they see a peer doing something at risk. They're people who are willing to report near misses so we can really find out what's going on. I would suggest to you we have to have that discretionary effort if we want to improve in safety. And the only way to get it is to increase the amount of positive reinforcement we deliver to people. Because if we only talk to them when they do it wrong, if we only point out mistakes, if we only use blame and discipline, then we're not going to get that. In fact, those things really undermine organizational learning. All right, does that make sense, everybody? Okay, so I'm going to go through this very quickly. I'm not an expert on HOP, and I think the talks we've heard today have really covered all of this. I think there's some great things that have come out of the HOP movement. First one is human error is inevitable. And I'm grateful to the HOP community for really stating this so bluntly, because I think it's something we all need to acknowledge. And for too long, I think, and unfortunately, the whole notion of zero harm sometimes implies that human error is not inevitable, and I think that's a mistake too. HOP also tells us that errors are a symptom of system problems. Couldn't agree more. We need to look more at the systems, not just look at individuals and blame them when they did something that they were trained not to do. Tapping into the expertise of the worker, also extremely important. They are in the best position to tell you exactly what's going on, what all the antecedents and consequences are, what are the things that pull them towards doing things that may put them at risk or put others at risk. We need to analyze the systems to understand those deviations. I like this too, the safety is not the absence of events. We talked about that just moments ago. And then improvement requires using leading indicators. I really believe that our focus on lagging indicators has done so much harm and really impedes improvements in safety. I see over and over again where senior leaders just spend too much time talking about reducing incident rate, and it drives all kinds of unproductive behavior on the part of managers in particular. We can talk about that later if you're interested. The other thing that has come out of HOP, I think, and has really increased focus on these things is that we need things like pre-job briefings, post-job discussions, what went well, what went wrong, stop work authority, all of those tools that are really important to help people think about the work they're about to do, think about the environment they're stepping into, how has it changed, what are the hazards, what are the risks that are different today than they might have been yesterday. Those are very valuable tools. So, in some cases, you will hear people talk about HOP as the opposite of behavior-based safety. I disagree. I think that the two are very, very similar, and there's things to be learned from both. So, where do these two fields agree? One is that blaming the worker, not only does it not improve anything, but it undermines your ability to get better. People's behavior makes sense to them. We heard this morning. I'll echo it here. People do things for reasons. They don't behave in at-risk ways because they don't care, or they're lazy, or they want to get hurt. They're doing what makes sense to them given the environment that they're working in. Optimal safety requires eliminating fear. We have to drive fear out of the workplace, or we will never know what's really going on. When people are fearful of being disciplined, when they're fearful of getting in trouble, when they're fearful of being embarrassed, they're not going to tell us what's really going on. So we've got to be very alert to all the ways that we have sometimes inadvertently built fear into our working places. Organizational systems influence behavior. And so the answer is not just walking around saying good job when people do the right things. And I think sometimes there's a misunderstanding that that's what behavior-based safety is about. That when we talk about using positive feedback and positive reinforcement, we're just talking about supervisors going around saying, good job, everybody. And that's an overly simplistic approach. What we need to do is we need to help people see how doing things in a safe way, how doing the pre-task risk assessment really helps them. So what's the best reinforcer for doing a good pre-task risk assessment? It's learning something and changing what I do and finding out that it's actually better that way. And so part of what we do with our clients is help supervisors to have meaningful conversations with people after they do those. So how did that work? What did you learn when you did that? What did you do differently as a result of doing that pre-task risk assessment? That's reinforcement, because we're now helping them see that what they've done is, in fact, helpful. And we need to obviously include workers in the design of solutions, since they know best. So these are all the ways that HOP and BBS are in agreement. I want to talk now about 7 ways that we can integrate what we've learned from BBS and HOP to improve safety. And I'm going to go through these each in a little bit of detail, so I'll skip through this slide. The first one is understand behaviors of everyone, not just hourly employees. Everybody behaves. Leaders behave. Executives behave. We need to look at all of that behavior. Behavior at the sharp end is a function of management behavior, of leader behavior, because leaders are the ones that design the systems and change the systems. So it ultimately comes back to what leaders do in terms of setting up those systems and executing on those systems. Manager and supervisor behavior is also a function of consequences. The ABC model applies to them as well. So we need to look at what are the consequences if we want a supervisor to run an effective pre-shift meeting, and what we find is they're just standing up there and going through the motions. Well, what are the consequences in place? What happens when they do a really good job, when they spend time preparing and really try to talk and pull people into the conversation? What happens to them? Anything good? Or do they get in trouble because they took too long in the pre-shift meeting and people didn't get to work on time? There are consequences constantly working on everybody's behavior. Changing systems requires changing behavior. The second one, explore how systems influence behavior. And the way to do this, as we've heard already today, is to go out and observe and ask. Talk to people. Ask questions like, hey, we've got this procedure in place. It's supposed to do this. Does it really? How does it work? Show me what you do. Are there any workarounds you figured out? Tell me about it. So going out and talking and listening and observing is the way we can really figure out how do those things really work. Now, the only way you're going to get real feedback, where people are really going to tell you what's going on, where they're really going to tell you about the workarounds they figured out, is if they trust you, right? Because if they're fearful that you're going to get them in trouble, that they'll get reprimanded, that they'll get embarrassed, then they're not going to tell you. And this has been said today already. The way you build trust is by going out and asking those questions before there's an injury, before there's an event. Go out when things are working, when things are going well. That's going to help build that trust and credibility. It also puts you in the position of being able to positively reinforce. Being able to say, that's great. I can't believe this is really, I like the way you've done this. We should get other people doing more of this. So it puts you in the position of using more positive consequences, of recognizing all the good, smart things that people are doing. The third one, always analyze from the performer's perspective. We talk about putting yourself in the performer's shoes. It is so easy standing away from something to say, well, that was ridiculous. What were they thinking? They must be crazy. But if you go and you put yourself in that situation and you look at all the things that were going on for that individual, the pressure they felt around production, the fact that the equipment wasn't working quite the way it was supposed to, the fact that their peers were putting pressure on them, then very often what people end up saying is, yeah, you know what? I probably would have done that too if I was in that circumstance. I don't know if there's a television show called Undercover Boss here in Peru. Anyone familiar with that? No? Okay. Yes? Okay. So for those of you who don't know, Undercover Boss is a TV show where they take the president or CEO of a company, put a disguise on him or her, and send him to work at the front line of their own organization. I love this. This is exactly what we're talking about, right? They go in and they get to find out all these great ideas they had, all these procedures they put in place, all these rules they talk about. They get to see how it really works. And inevitably, they're shocked and appalled at what people have to go through to get the work done. They don't usually talk much about safety, but it would be the same thing. They'd be shocked at how hard they've made it in some cases for people to do the right thing. We shouldn't have to put a disguise on to find out how things are really working. If we build enough credibility with people, if we talk to them when things are going right, we're going to find out without having to put a disguise on. Listening is very important, and I think many times we don't listen very well, so using good active listening. And the other thing to recognize is that often at-risk behaviors have been going on for a long time. Whenever we've been working with a client and there's an incident, and people find out that there was some deviation, they didn't follow the procedure, whatever the case may be, it's easy for the leaders to say, well, that individual just didn't do it. That was just a bad person. But in reality, if you dig and you look at what's the environmental context, what are the antecedents and consequences, what you discover is a lot of people are doing those things because the systems support it. And so this starts to take us, again, away from blaming people and saying, okay, there's a lot of people doing this. What do we need to do differently? Talking to the frontline performers about changing those systems. Eliminating blame and fear, so important and so difficult, right? So difficult. As we've talked about, when people are fearful that they're going to get in trouble, they're not going to be honest. But unfortunately, that safety cop approach to managing safety is the default. In other words, if most people don't purposely try to manage safety differently, they're going to use the safety cop approach. They're going to look for what's wrong. They're going to only intervene when there's a problem. And that's going to undermine trust, credibility, and you're not going to hear what's really going on. So it's hard to do. It's hard to make that change. I really like what Virginia Sharp talked about. She talked about forward-looking accountability. She said very often after there's an incident or something has gone wrong, we are using backward-looking accountability. We're trying to find out who was at fault, who's to blame, who do we punish. None of that is helpful. It doesn't solve the problem that the system is encouraging the wrong kinds of things. Instead, let's look forward and say what needs to happen to prevent that from happening again. What do we need supervisors to do? What do we need managers to do? What do we need the front line to do? And that what we should hold people accountable for are those proactive behaviors, not holding them accountable for what happened in the past. I think that's brilliant. Remember, too, that punishment isn't always intentional. There are many ways that we discourage or punish the very behaviors that we want. The best example of that is in near-miss reporting. How many of you have a near-miss reporting system where you encourage workers to report near misses? Okay. How many of you would say your near-miss reporting system is really working well? You're getting lots of near misses reported. Okay, there's 2 hands. Why? I can tell you why most near-miss reporting systems don't work well, and the answer is fear. What happens when someone reports a near miss? In some cases, people get punished for it. If it's really bad, someone's going to say, this is terrible, I can't believe this person did it, we can't let this stand, we've got to discipline them. Or we've got to let them go. So that's an obvious example. Less obvious example, oh, this is a good near miss, everybody can learn from this, we'll post it for the whole organization to see. And even if you take names off those, very often people can figure out exactly who did it, and then that person's embarrassed. So if I'm embarrassed, if I get reprimanded, or if I have a lot of paperwork to do to report a near miss, am I more likely to report them or less likely? I'm less likely. So again, sometimes we discourage the very behaviors we want. You have to very carefully think about what will happen when someone reports a near miss. And will it encourage them to report again, or will it discourage? we're always just thinking about what's the lesson to be learned from it. And of course, that's why we do it. But we really need to pay attention to that individual and what happens to that person. Number 5, we need to stop with knee-jerk reactions, blanket solutions, new rules. We worked at the underground coal mine, and they had a series of injuries related to pocket knives. And so they made a rule, no pocket knives underground. And then they were surprised to find they had another series of injuries as people used other things that they should have used a pocket knife for, because they needed the pocket knife underground. So not only did that rule not solve the problem, they still had injuries, but what do you think the front line, the miners, what do you think they thought of management when that rule came down? They thought management has no clue what we do. They don't understand the work we do. These rules don't make any sense. So trust and credibility is gone. Those kinds of blanket solutions, I think they make management feel good, right? It always feels good to take some sort of decisive action and say, this is what we're going to do to fix that problem. But rarely, of course, do they fix the problem. They often cause more harm than good and almost always erode trust. It is much better to involve the workers in the solutions. Now, this is messy, right? It sounds so much easier to just make a rule and everything will get better. It is a lot more difficult to go and talk to people and figure out strategies. That's going to be messier. But the bottom line is it's the only way to make improvement. It's never going to be easy. And there is no such thing as an easy fix, right? Number 6, senior leaders, their job should be to verify system effectiveness. Many of the clients we work with have senior leaders, and the expectation is they will go out into the mine, out to the workforce, periodically and walk around and interact with people. How many of you have some sort of that kind of expectation that your senior people will get out to the workplace periodically? Nobody? Some? So what ends up happening in most cases is those senior leaders go out and they put their safety cop hat on. They go looking for problems. They go looking for hazards that haven't been taken care of. They go looking for violations. What does that do to trust and credibility? It undermines it, right? A better thing for senior leaders to do is to go out and see how are the systems and rules and regulations and all the things we've put in place, how are they working? How are they really working? And asking those questions. When you do that, you build relationships. You don't undermine relationships. And you look like you're there to help. And that's what you should be there to do, is to help. It usually isn't helpful to have a senior person go out and do an audit of some sort. They often don't know what they're looking at. So it's a waste of time to do that. It is far better that they go out to assess the impact of their systems. Their job really is to invest in resilient designs to make sure our systems are generating the kind of performance that we want. The last one is to strive for consistent use of our safety tools. So the 2 mines that we're working with right now, that's exactly what they're having us do. They've got wonderful safety management systems, great tools. They do a good job of training and things like pre-task risk assessments and pre-shift meetings, all kinds of great tools, good checklists that they have in place, and yet they're still having fatalities. And when we went in to do our assessment, they brought us in because they thought, well, maybe we're missing something. Maybe there's tools out there that we don't know about. And what we said to them is, no, you've got all the tools you could possibly want. Your training is excellent. The problem is people aren't using the tools consistently. The pre-task risk assessments. Some people are just pencil whipping them, right? Just checking the boxes and not really doing it. Other people are doing it very carefully, really thoughtfully. So the question is, how do we get everybody to use those tools consistently and with quality? and it's behavior, right? We've got to make sure that the person who does a good job and is really thorough, that we're there to say, excellent, what did you learn from that? What did you do differently? Wonderful. How about if you go and talk about this with some of your peers? We think you've come up with a great idea. So we're reinforcing what they've done. The people that are just checking the boxes, we need to go and say, we see you're just doing this very quickly. What do you need to be able to do a better job? What do you need to do a more thorough job? And sometimes the answer is just to see why it matters, to help them see that doing it better will result in more efficient work, more effective work. So building in more positive reinforcement in our terminology to make sure those things are happening. So some parting thoughts, and then got time, I think, for some questions. I think, again, BBS and HOP are entirely compatible. We're saying some of the same things. Unfortunately, as I said, BBS has been around for 25 years. There's a lot of poorly done BBS out there that maybe doesn't look compatible with what we've learned today from the HOP folks, but it is. If you really dig and learn about the science of behavior, you'll find tremendous compatibility. There's a lot to learn from all these approaches. I think somebody said this morning, safety, there's no silver bullet. There's no one thing that's going to make it perfectly. We've got to continuously learn, pull in things that are effective and are working from wherever they come from. We may talk about things differently in HOP and behavioral approaches, but there's no point in saying one is better, one is worse. We need to learn from each other. If any of you are interested, so two things. I have an article that is really everything I've talked about today is in the article, and that's available. I assume there's a website that's available on. So if you're interested, that will be there. We also have a couple of our books. We have 3 safety books. 2 of them have been translated into Spanish. So if you're interested, you can go to our website. We have some other articles translated into Spanish too. So just some more resources if you're interested in learning more about a behavioral approach. Thank you for your attention, and I'll take any questions if you have any.
Muy bien, muchas gracias por la brillante presentación de la doctora Lin. Ahora sí, me van a permitir algunos apuntes antes de... Pero quisiera ver manos levantadas para las preguntas. A ver,
raise your hands first to see how many questions we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. Okay, perfect.
Todos debemos ser coaches.
We must
¿Qué les parece esa
all
reflexión?
be coaches. What do you think about
Todos podemos
that?
enseñar.
We can all teach.
Todos podemos dar el ejemplo.
We can all
Ese
teach
es
through examples.
una reflexión.
So that's a first
Refuerzos
reflection.
positivos.
Positive reinforcement.
Eso agregan valor.
That adds value.
Antes de buscar errores en las personas, hay que
Before
revisar
finding
primero que
errors made by people,
nuestros
we have
sistemas.
to review. What do we need to review? Our
Hacemos al revés
systems.
nosotros. Primero
We
buscamos
tend to
el
do the
error
other
de
way
las
around.
personas
First,
y
we
después vamos y
blame
vemos a ver si nuestro
people, and
sistema
then we go
falla
to
o no.
check if our system has failed or not.
¿Cómo se gana la confianza y la
How do we win
credibilidad de
the
las
trust
personas?
and credibility
Esa sería
of
mi primera pregunta,
individuals?
doctora.
That would be my first question.
¿Cómo ganamos
How do
la
we win
credibilidad y la confianza de
credibility
las
and
personas?
trust
Fíjense,
of people?
estoy ahí. Es un privilegio que
It's a
tengo
privilege
por lo
that
menos
I
para ser el
have
primero en preguntar.
to be able to ask the first question.
Las personas no están
So
utilizando las
individuals are not
herramientas.
using the tools.
Las herramientas para gestionar,
tools
para
to
gerenciar la
manage
seguridad ya están hechas, ya están dadas.
These tools to
Las
manage
tenemos
safety
y las tienen
are
todas las
there.
empresas,
We have them. Every single
no la
company
usamos.
has them, but we fail to make use of them.
Finalmente,
And
algo
finally,
que
something
lo dijo, y acá la doctora lo ha tratado muy
that was
sucintamente,
said in this presentation,
en la
she
mañana,
touched on, and it
las
was mentioned this
personas van a
morning,
hacer lo que le
individuals
permitimos hacer.
will do what we allow them to do.
Ojo, las personas van a hacer lo que les
Take note.
permitimos hacer.
People will
¿Eso
do
qué
what we
significa?
allow them to do.
Disciplina.
What does this
Bien,
mean?
entonces quisiera, por favor,
Discipline.
doctora,
So,
Si
Judy,
me permite
if
esa
you would
pregunta,
allow me that
¿cómo
first question,
hacemos para
how
ganar la
to
confianza y la
ensure we can win the
credibilidad en
trust and credibility
nuestros trabajadores?
among our workers?
Okay, good. Yeah.
Muy bien.
There's not one way
No hay
to
una
build
manera
trust and
única
credibility, as you might
de
imagine. There's a
generar
number of things you can
credibilidad y
do.
confianza. Hay
I
una
think
serie
the
de
first
cosas que
one
podemos
is
hacer. La primera
asking questions instead of telling people. If someone is not following procedure, if someone is pencil whipping a form, if someone is not using a tool, don't go up and say, "What the heck are you doing?" Say, "Tell me why you're not using this tool. Tell me what it is about the tool that you find is not useful." Ask them, invite them to tell you why. There's a reason. It's almost never because they're lazy or they don't care. And usually what you're going to hear is they don't find value in it. Now, sometimes it's because there is no value in it. We're asking them to do things that don't add value. Very often, it's just that they don't see the value. So the second thing to do is if they say, "Well, you know, I do all this, but I don't see how it makes any difference," to say, "Well, okay, how about this? Just do this for me today, and I'm going to come back a little later, and we'll talk about it." You go back a little later and you say, "So you did this, what did you find?" And what you need to do then is point out the value. Do you see how, for example, when you did that pre-task risk assessment, it actually changed how you approached this job? Oh, yeah, I guess it did. Okay, so that's the value in doing this. It really does make a difference. So you see, what I'm doing is simply pointing out. I'm not saying good job, thanks for doing it. I'm simply pointing out what most people don't notice, the subtle changes, the subtle improvements in performance. So ask more questions, point out the value, point out what's good about what they're doing, and then ask what you can do to help them get better. Those are sort of some of the basics.
Bien, por acá teníamos la primera mano levantada. Por favor, acá.
Por acá.
Por favor, la pregunta concisa para hacer un poco más de preguntas, ¿ok? Gracias.
Hi, Judy. I appreciate a lot your presentation. You explained a lot of my mistakes in the last 45 years, I think so.
You're not alone.
The question is, a lot of companies do a lot of misunderstanding about consequences, yeah?
Yes.
When we talk about consequences in the ABC model, they don't understand consequences. And much more crazy is when we put gold rules as a management system, and then we put management consequence just as a punishment system. Yeah?
Right.
And a lot of us do it in a very bad way.
Yes, absolutely. That is, as I said, that's really the default way. We tell people what to do, and then the only time we talk to them is when they don't do it or they do it wrong. It's management by exception. And again, it's a very natural response. Nobody should feel bad about that. But we have to be very deliberate about making sure we go out when things are going right. And that's the only way to change that.
Thank you.
¿Por acá?
Sí, a ver, perdón un minuto, seguimos con usted.
Muchas gracias. Mi nombre es Luciano.
My name is Luciano.
Doctora, quisiera, la exposición que usted ha hecho es muy buena e interesante. Sin embargo, quisiera que pudiera aclararme sobre el sistema BBS.
BBS system. Hello, can you hear me now? 1, 2, 3, can you hear? 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? I'm on. 1, 2, 3.
Bueno, decía que el sistema BBS está basado en el comportamiento de las personas. Bueno, el comportamiento de las personas varía de acuerdo al estado anímico de cada persona, de cada trabajador que tenemos en la mina. Y ese estado anímico de las personas habría que verlo también desde la perspectiva de quiénes están detrás de los trabajadores. Por ejemplo, detrás de los trabajadores está la familia. Y el trabajador puede cambiar su estado anímico de cómo se va a comportar dentro del centro laboral por los problemas que pueda tener la familia. la esposa puede estar enferma, los hijos pueden estar en mal camino y muchas cosas, deudas que pueda estar afrontando. Y eso hace que el trabajador pueda estar desempeñándose de una forma inadecuada en el centro laboral. Y entonces, quisiera que usted nos pueda aclarar o hacer su comentario respecto a que cómo es que la organización minera debería trasvasar un poco fuera del entorno del centro laboral y ver un poco más allá y ver a la familia para que pueda también capturar las necesidades que tiene este trabajador, porque por causa de estas cosas podría estar ocurriendo muchos accidentes. Gracias por sus comentarios.
That's a great question. As I mentioned, a lot of things influence our behavior, and one of the things that influence our behavior is what's going on in our personal lives, what's going on at home, whether we got enough sleep, whether our spouse is sick or our kids are sick, all those things. And of course, we can't control all those things. I think one of the best, well, there's two things I would say about that. One is I think it's very, very important that in particular our frontline supervisors have good relationships with the people that work for them. There's a book not there because we don't have it in Spanish, but a book that I wrote on supervisors' safety leadership, because I think that role is so critical. And one of the first chapter, I think, is on building relationships with the people that work for you. When we have a relationship with people, we're more likely to spot when something's wrong, when they don't look like they're themselves, when they're distracted in some way. So that helps. I think the other thing to do is, and many of you may be doing this already, but kind of a fit-for-duty check that some of our clients use, where you really check in with everybody before the beginning of the shift and just say, how are you doing today? Get enough sleep? Everything going okay at home? Are you concerned about anything that's going to distract you today? And if, again, if you've got a good relationship with people and they're willing to say, you know what, I do have a lot of stuff going on at home, then maybe we can put that person on a job where it's going to be, easier for them to stay on task, or maybe we send them home and say you need to be at home with your sick children as opposed to being here and distracted by that. So I think those two things are the only things that I've seen that can help with that. Good question.
Hola Judy, te habla Elliot Kulki de Strat.
He's asking the question in English.
No sé si tú has tenido la oportunidad de ver los KPIs de nuestro sector de minas en Perú. Quiero hacer una introducción. Y si llamamos al concepto de la curva de Bradley, podría decir que nuestro sector estaría en una etapa reactiva a dependiente. La mayoría de nuestras compañías son de mano de obra intensiva. Tienen entre 10.000 a 15.000 empleados. Yo sé que no existe receta única, pero en este contexto, ¿cuál crees tú que sería la mejor o la receta o tu recomendación para poder implementar y tener éxito en un sistema de seguridad basado en el comportamiento y no morir en el intento? Por favor, gracias. Anticipadamente.
I'm not sure I know what the question is in there.
No entendió muy bien la pregunta.
La pregunta es, ¿cuál sería la mejor receta para poder implementar un BBS en este contexto, en nuestras organizaciones?
Right, okay. So what's the best way to implement behavior-based safety? Of course, no simple answer to that. I think The first thing, what we do when an organization comes to us for behavior-based safety is we always insist on first doing an assessment, a readiness assessment. Not every organization should do behavior-based safety. If you don't have some trust and credibility, if your management systems aren't working well, then you're probably not ready. If your frontline population says that management isn't doing what they need to be doing, they don't fix the hazards that we report to them, then our recommendation would be you're not ready for behavior-based safety. So kind of get leadership in line, get all your other systems and processes in line, and then you're probably in a good position to implement behavior-based safety. It is not a simple thing to implement. It has to be done very carefully. You have to ensure that there's anonymity. So if you're going to ask peers to observe each other and collect data, there has to be anonymity. You can't do that, have them collect data, and then punish them for it. They won't want to do it anymore. So it has to be anonymous. You have to give them some freedom and flexibility to be able to give each other feedback and allow them to really manage the process, not keeping management out of it completely, having a role for managers and supervisors to play, and that needs to be clearly defined as well. But it really, really requires that sort of foundational trust, credibility, and systems in place first. It's not the solution for every organization. I don't know if that answered your question.
A ver, una última pregunta. ¿Ya? Ok, dale.
Bueno, gracias por lo que nos ha compartido el día de hoy. Según su experiencia, ¿qué tipo de complicaciones ha tenido en la implementación de seguridad basada en comportamiento en nuestro país, en donde nos cuesta trabajar con equipos multidisciplinarios porque cada quien creemos tener la razón, el psicólogo cree tener la razón, el ingeniero cree tener la razón, y por eso se dan tantos conflictos en nuestro país, en donde se cierran unidades mineras. Es increíble. ¿Qué tipo de complicaciones ha encontrado en la implementación de seguridad basada en comportamiento?
Well, and I have not implemented a BBS system in Peru, so I can't address that question specifically. But the issue of, different groups of people thinking they have the answer and arguing, I think, again, in that sort of circumstance, I would want to pull people together and talk about, where they have differences of opinion, try to bring people together, build a BBS process with all those parties together that's going to meet the expectations of everybody or help shift the expectations. One of the mistakes that's been made in BBS is just pulling the frontline groups aside and having them do something that's separate from what anybody else is doing, and that's not going to work. You're a big team, you have to work together, and BBS should help you work together, but you've got to start by bringing people together, having common expectations, common understanding. And I will tell you that when we have implemented BBS, again, not here in Peru, but in organizations where there are differences of opinion, what the science of behavior does is it gives you a common understanding and some common language to talk about behavior. It gets you away from blame, away from pointing fingers at it's their fault, and brings people together to say, we all have a role to play. We all contribute to the systems, to the consequences, and so let's look at what each of us can do to support the goal we all have, which is safe production. And so I think with that as your primary goal that everybody has, we want everyone to be safe. If we can have that common understanding, we can move towards our ultimate objective. Not easy.
Thank you. Bueno, ya por cuestiones de tiempo, las preguntas hemos terminado. Quiero, en nombre del Licen, agradecer a la doctora Xxiii por su excelente presentación. Por favor, despidámoslos con un fuerte aplauso. Queremos darles unos minutos, por favor, para que ustedes puedan visitar los stands. Aprovechen. Hoy día va a entregar tickets para sorteos. Ya saben, los visiten. Y en 5 o 6 minutos se va a servir el break. Así que aprovechen para visitar los stands. No se desesperen por el break. Vayan, visiten los stands y luego ya se acercan a los breaks. Muchas gracias.
Buenas tardes, estimados. Mi nombre es Elvis Guamán, Product Manager de Sistema de Puesta a Tierra y Seguridad Eléctrica Industrial de la empresa Promelsa. En este año 2019 a Promelsa le da un gusto poder participar en esta feria muy importante de la seguridad minera. Y bueno, para poder presentarle un poco de nuestro portafolio que estamos ofreciendo en lo que es seguridad eléctrica, estamos ofreciendo lo que es primero los equipos de protección personal, tanto que son de la marca Xxiii, que es una marca de origen francés, una marca importada, que somos los únicos importadores de esta marca. Y sobre todo nosotros nos caracterizamos sobre todo para ofrecer, por ejemplo, en este caso, lo que es los trajes anti-arco eléctrico, que son muy importantes en el sector minero, que nosotros abarcamos tanto lo que son de 12 hasta 100 calorías por centímetros cuadrados. Y no solamente eso, sino también podemos ofrecerles tanto lo que es los guantes dieléctricos o aislantes en sus variados de sector de clases, ¿ya? Desde 0 hasta la clase 4, diferentes tensiones. También tenemos lo que son todos los cascos anti-arco eléctrico también, y sobre todo también un tema muy importante, las herramientas aisladas. Todos los productos de equipos de protección personal de la marca Xxiii cumplen con sus debidas certificaciones y normas internacionales, para que ustedes puedan trabajar más seguros. Come por acá, por favor. Con el tema de lo que es sistema de puesta a tierra, nosotros también tenemos lo que son los cementos conductivos, tanto lo que es de la marca Conducre y la marca Saner, son marcas también importadas americanas, ¿okay? Y que conjuntamente también trabajan con las soldaduras exotérmicas de la marca Thermol. Y un producto innovador que nosotros estamos ofreciendo el día de hoy es la unidad remota a distancia, ¿okay? Para las soldaduras exotérmicas, para nosotros poder realizar esto, como lo estaba explicando, a modo de distancia y ya no usar el modo tradicional del chispero. Otro producto también innovador que nosotros tenemos también son los pararrayos de la marca Xxiii, ¿okay? Y la marca Oscuna, que después también hemos traído acá a la feria, muy importantes también para el sector minero, que conjuntamente trabajan con los detectores de tormentas, y nosotros estamos trayendo de la marca Xxiii. Todos los productos de seguridad eléctrica industrial y los productos del sistema de puesta a tierra, hoy acá en Promelsa les hemos traído para que ustedes puedan conocerlos y para que lo puedan utilizar en sus empresas, en sus diversos sectores. Les invitamos por favor a que puedan visitar nuestra página web en Promelsa, sino en todo caso también visitar nuestra empresa, que se encuentra en la sede principal en Arriola, y que un personal actualizado y muy capacitado gustosamente lo pueda atender. Muchas gracias.
Somos Seguridad, nosotros somos fabricantes y comercializadores de equipos de protección personal. Nosotros fabricamos todo lo que es calzados en cuero, botas de caucho, botas PVC, vestimenta de cuero. También somos representantes socios estratégicos de las marcas DuPont, Honeywell y Xxiii. Tenemos marcas representativas de Wonder Grip en guantes, lo que es equipos de radio aluminizado para acercamiento al fuego, trajes especializados para ciertos contaminantes, como protecciones auditivas, protección de ojos, de cara, todo lo que es equipo de protección personal para todos sus colaboradores en distintos sectores económicos, minería, agroindustria, pesca, construcción, industria en general. Estamos a su servicio cuando usted lo solicite.
Vamos a presentar el equipo de simulación que utilizaremos en nuestro curso de manejo defensivo, tanto para equipos livianos como para equipos pesados. A continuación lo dejamos con la prueba del equipo.
Muy bien, compañeros de Xxiii. En este momento ya estamos en el simulador, como lo dijo el ingeniero Fernando Borja, estamos incluyendo un simulador en los cursos de manejo defensivo. Como ustedes pueden observar, tenemos un conductor ya en este momento y él está viendo todo lo que sucede a su alrededor. Es una realidad virtual. En el simulador nosotros podemos hacer cambios. En este momento él tiene un ambiente tranquilo con un atardecer, pero nosotros podemos hacerle cambios acá, podemos pasar dentro del reloj, podemos ponerlo al día, podemos regresarlo al día y ver esos temas, podemos poner en la noche, hacer cambios con los climas, hacer cambios con tráfico, simular algunas averías, algunos obstáculos, cambiar los ambientes de terreno. ¿Okay? En este momento lo que vamos a hacer una simulación, voy a hacer los cambios acá en pantalla para que ustedes observen cómo es que el observador lo ve en la realidad. Él está en noche, vamos a pasarle al amanecer, vamos a ponerle climas lluviosos, con alta lluvia, vamos a ponerle un poco de tránsito y es lo que va a reflejar en este momento en pantalla. Eso es lo que está reflejando y el conductor tiene que tener las habilidades y vamos a evaluar esas habilidades. También podemos incluir obstáculos como, por ejemplo, incluso algún animal. El conductor en este momento, si tuvo la pericia, observó y pudo frenar. Podemos también poner, por ejemplo, un checkpoint. Las luces de un perro. No lo vio y lo atropelló. No tuvo el tiempo. En resumen, esto es lo que nosotros vamos a dar para el entrenamiento con el simulador en manejo defensivo. Adicional a ello, el equipo total bota unas estadísticas. Está operando el equipo. Nosotros dentro de esto vamos a entregar un paquete acá el sistema, la cual se les hará llegar a los jefes inmediatos del operador. Muchas gracias.
¿Qué tal, chicos? ¿Cómo están? Los invitamos a que puedan venir a nuestro stand de Xxiii Solutions. Somos una empresa chilena que estamos abriendo operaciones en Perú. Somos representantes de las marcas de líderes del mundo como Stalvile, que está entrando a Perú, Enerpac, y tenemos dinamómetros especiales y tecnología, innovación tecnológica que les pueda interesar para mejorar la eficiencia de sus operaciones y seguridad en las mismas. Los invitamos, los esperamos. Gracias.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Bueno, los invitamos a visitar nuestro stand. Estamos aquí mostrando las últimas novedades e innovaciones en cuanto a cámaras de refugio para emergencia en minas subterráneas, además de otros productos novedosos que tenemos como nuestros monitores de gases con monitoreo remoto y de bajo mantenimiento, nuestras lámparas mineras y además otros sistemas para uso en emergencia. Así que los esperamos acá en nuestro stand.
Hola, somos RW Outfitters Perú. Somos una empresa proveedora de equipos de seguridad industrial. Representamos líneas que ofrecen valores agregados ideales para la industria minera en el país. Representamos marcas como Red Wing. Red Wing es una marca de calzado de seguridad de origen norteamericano. El plus de la marca es que ofrece calzado 100% impermeable y con garantía de 1 año para defectos de fabricación e impermeabilidad. Dentro de nuestros productos también tenemos a la marca Dunlop con botas de poliuretano de alta densidad, ideales también para operaciones mina. Y alternativas como guantes de trabajo, con protección de corte, con protección de impacto, lentes de seguridad y pisos antideslizantes, cubiertas antideslizantes. Pueden seguirnos en www.rwoperú.com.
Bueno, nosotros somos la empresa NeuroIGP y nos dedicamos a la gestión de los riesgos operacionales, donde utilizamos una gestión integral de riesgo, donde incorporamos ICANN y Bowtie, lo integramos, pero además de hacer eso, incorporamos la neurociencia. Entonces, la neurociencia desde el punto de vista de los factores humanos, de cómo los factores humanos inciden en el comportamiento de las personas frente al control de los riesgos y a la administración del sistema.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Víctor Hernández, represento a la empresa Qualitat. Nosotros venimos de capitales chilenos con oficinas ya establecidas en Lima, con tecnologías de realidad virtual que producen una inversión en la cual los trabajadores pueden hacer y vivir una experiencia y capacitarse en línea, en forma simulada real y obteniendo resultados claros para su compañía. Tenemos más de 9 años, 50 proyectos que nos avalan y esperamos que nos puedan contactar para solucionar sus próximos problemas. Muchas gracias.